Jake Morrison wiped the sweat from his forehead as he finished checking the fusion reactor's power levels. The machine hummed quietly in the underground chamber beneath New Terra Colony. Everything looked good. The reactor would keep running smoothly for another month before it needed his attention again. "Jake, are you finished with the morning check?" Cathara's voice came from behind him. Her words always sounded musical, even when she spoke human language. Jake had worked with the young Zalathi scientist for 2 years now, but he still found her accent beautiful. Jake turned around and smiled at his alien friend. Cathara stood about 6 feet tall, with pale blue skin that seemed to glow softly in the reactor room's dim light. Her large dark eyes watched him with what Jake had learned to recognize as concern. The Zalathi looked similar to humans in many ways, but their skin colors ranged from light blue to deep purple, and they had no hair on their heads. Instead, they had small gem-like growths that changed color with their emotions. "All done," Jake said, closing his toolkit. "The reactor is running perfectly. Your people build amazing machines." Cathara's gems flickered a warm golden color, which Jake knew meant she was pleased. "Thank you, Jake. Your knowledge of human engineering helps us maintain the systems better than we could alone." They walked together through the colony's underground tunnels. New Terra Colony had been built into a series of connected domes and underground chambers. The surface of this planet was too dangerous for permanent settlement, with its violent storms and deadly radiation from the twin suns. But underground, humans and Zalathi had created a safe home together. Jake and Cathara emerged into the main dome, where the colony's central plaza stretched out before them. Humans and Zalathi moved through the area, some working together, others keeping to their own groups. The cooperation was still new and sometimes awkward, but it was working. "Jake," Cathara said quietly as they walked. Her gems had shifted to a nervous blue-green color. "I need to ask you something." Jake noticed the change in her tone immediately. In 2 years of friendship, he had learned to read Cathara's moods almost as well as those of his human friends. Something was making her worried. "What is it?" he asked, stopping near a bench overlooking the plaza's garden area. Cathara looked around nervously, as if checking to see who might be listening. "My mother wants to meet you." Jake blinked in surprise. "Your mother? I thought she lived in the Zalathi capital city." "She does, but she is here now, visiting our colony. She has heard about our friendship." Cathara's gems were now flashing between blue and silver, which Jake had never seen before. "That's great," Jake said, though he was confused by Cathara's obvious anxiety. "I'd love to meet her." Cathara shook her head quickly. "Jake, you do not understand. My mother is not just any Zalathi. She is Matriarch Velthera, one of the high diplomats who helped create the treaty between our peoples." Jake felt his stomach drop a little. He had heard that name before in colony briefings. Matriarch Velthara was one of the most powerful Zalathi leaders, someone who had the authority to make decisions that affected both human and Zalathi colonies across this entire star system. "She wants to invite you to dinner," Cathara continued, "at our family compound tomorrow evening." Jake tried to process this information. A high-ranking Zalathi diplomat wanted to have dinner with him, a simple maintenance engineer. "Why me?" he asked. Cathara's gems turned a deep blue color that Jake recognized as sadness or worry. "I think she wants to understand why I spend so much time with a human. Some Zalathi do not approve of our friendship." Jake had suspected this might be true. He had noticed that some of the Zalathi colonists seemed uncomfortable when they saw him and Cathara working together. And some of the human colonists had made comments too, suggesting that Jake was being too friendly with the aliens. "What do you think I should do?" Jake asked. "I think you should be careful," said a voice behind them. Jake turned to see Amy Foster approaching. The security officer's face was serious and her hand rested casually on her weapon belt. "Amy," Jake said with a slight nod. They had dated briefly when he first arrived at the colony, but it had not worked out. They were still friends, but things were sometimes awkward between them. "I heard what you were talking about," Amy said, looking directly at Cathara. "Jake, you need to understand that Zalathi family customs are not like human customs. There could be more to this invitation than just dinner." Cathara's gems flashed an angry red color. "Are you saying my family would harm Jake?" Amy held up her hands. "I'm not saying anything like that. But I am saying that Jake should be prepared for anything. The Zalathi have rituals and customs that humans don't understand." Jake looked between his human friend and his alien friend. Both of them were trying to protect him, but they clearly did not trust each other. I appreciate your concern, Amy, Jake said carefully, but Cathara has been my friend and partner for 2 years. If her mother wants to meet me, I think I should go. Amy frowned. Jake, think about this. Why would a high-ranking diplomat want to meet a maintenance worker? There has to be more to this. Cathara stepped closer to Jake. My mother wants to meet you because you are important to me, because you have shown that humans and Zalathi can work together and be friends. Is that so hard to believe? Jake made his decision. I'll go to dinner, he said. Cathara, please tell your mother I accept her invitation. Amy shook her head but did not argue further. Just be careful, Jake, and remember that you can call for help if you need it. After Amy walked away, Cathara looked at Jake with gratitude. Thank you for trusting me, she said softly. Of course I trust you, Jake replied. You're my friend. But as they walked back toward their workstations, Jake could not shake the feeling that this dinner invitation was more complicated than it seemed. He had worked hard to build a good relationship with the Zalathi colonists, and he did not want to do anything that might damage the careful peace between their peoples. The next evening, Jake stood in front of his small quarters, adjusting his best clean clothes and trying to calm his nerves. He had no idea what to expect from dinner with a Zalathi matriarch, but he was determined to represent humanity well. As he walked through the colony toward the Zalathi residential section, Jake passed other colonists who watched him with curious expressions. Word had spread quickly about his dinner invitation, and everyone seemed to have an opinion about it. The Zalathi compound was unlike anything Jake had seen before. The buildings were made of some kind of crystalline material that seemed to glow with its own inner light. The architecture was flowing and organic, nothing like the practical human structures in other parts of the colony. As Jake approached the main entrance, he took a deep breath and tried to prepare himself for whatever was coming. He had no idea that this simple dinner invitation would change everything he thought he knew about human-Zalathi relations, and about his own place in this new world they were building together. Jake stepped through the entrance of the Zalathi compound and immediately felt like he had entered another world. The walls around him pulsed with soft, changing colors that seemed to respond to his presence. The floor beneath his feet felt warm and slightly soft, unlike the metal and concrete he was used to in the human sections of the colony. Cathara met him in the entrance hall. She wore formal Zalathi clothing that Jake had never seen before, flowing robes that seemed to be made of the same light-producing material as the walls. Her gems were flickering between gold and silver, which Jake thought might mean she was excited but nervous. Welcome to our family home, Cathara said, her voice more formal than usual. My mother is waiting for us in the main dining chamber. Jake followed her through corridors lined with what looked like living art. The walls showed moving pictures of Zalathi history and culture. Jake saw images of their homeworld with its purple skies and crystal forests. He saw Zalathi ceremonies and celebrations that looked both beautiful and mysterious. Jake, Cathara said quietly as they walked, there are some things you should know about Zalathi dinner customs. We eat in a specific order, and there are ritual words that must be spoken. I will help guide you. Thank you, Jake said, feeling more nervous with each step. I don't want to accidentally offend anyone. They entered a large circular room with a table that seemed to be carved from a single piece of glowing crystal. The light from the table cast dancing shadows on the walls. At the head of the table sat a Zalathi woman who Jake immediately knew must be matriarch Velthara. Velthara was taller than Cathara, with skin that was a deeper shade of blue. Her gems were larger and more numerous than her daughter's, and they glowed with a steady, powerful light that seemed to fill the room. When she looked at Jake, he felt as if she was seeing straight through him. Standing beside Velthara was an elderly Zalathi male with dark purple skin and gems that had turned almost black with age. Cathara whispered to Jake that this was Elder Zeftol, her mother's advisor. Welcome, Jake Morrison, Velthara said in perfect human language. Her voice was deep and commanding. Please sit. Jake took the seat that Cathara indicated directly across from the matriarch. The crystal chair molded itself to his body, becoming surprisingly comfortable. The dinner began with a series of small dishes that Cathara quietly explained to Jake. Each dish had a specific meaning in Zalathi culture, and Jake was supposed to eat them in a particular way. The food was strange but not unpleasant. Some dishes tasted like earth and minerals, while others had flavors Jake could not identify at all. For the first part of the meal, the conversation was polite and careful. Velthara asked Jake about his work, his background, and his opinions about the colony. Jake answered honestly, trying to be respectful while also representing his own people well. "You have been working with my daughter for 2 years," Velthara said, as they finished the main course. "This is unusual. Most humans in Zalathi work together for specific projects, then return to their own people." Jake glanced at Kethara, who was staring at her plate. "Kethara and I work well together," he said. "We have become good friends." Elder Zeftal spoke for the first time. "Friends," he repeated as if the word tasted bad in his mouth. "Young human, do you understand what friendship means to the Zalathi people?" Jake felt the conversation taking a serious turn. "I'm not sure I understand the question." Velthara leaned forward, her gems blazing brighter. "Among my people, true friendship is not given lightly. It is a bond that carries responsibilities and obligations. When a Zalathi claims friendship with someone, they are saying that person is worthy of trust, respect, and protection. I feel the same way about Kethara," Jake said carefully. "Do you?" Velthara asked. "Are you willing to prove that your friendship is real?" Jake felt a chill run down his spine. Something about the matriarch's tone made him think this was not a simple question. "What do you mean?" Velthara stood up from her chair. The light in the room seemed to dim, except for the glow from her gems. "I mean, young human, that words are easy to speak. Anyone can claim to be a friend. But true friendship, true worthiness must be proven through action." Kethara suddenly stood up as well. "Mother, please. Jake is my friend. He has already proven himself through 2 years of loyal partnership." "Has he?" Elder Zeftal asked coldly. "He has done his job and been pleasant to work with. But has he truly proven that humans deserve to stand as equals with the Zalathi?" Jake felt his confusion turning to alarm. "I don't understand what this is about." Velthara walked around the table until she stood directly in front of Jake. "It is about the future of our peoples, Jake Morrison. There are many Zalathi who believe that humans are too primitive, too weak, too short-sighted to be true partners in building a new civilization." "That's not true," Jake said, standing up to face her. "Is it not?" Velthara asked. "Then prove it. Accept the Kethmiran." Kethara gasped, her gems flashing bright red with shock and fear. "Mother, no. You cannot ask this of him?" Jake looked between mother and daughter, completely lost. "What is the Kethmiran?" Elder Zeftal answered with what might have been a cruel smile. "It is our most sacred trial of worthiness. For thousands of years, young Zalathi warriors have undergone the Kethmiran to prove themselves worthy of joining the highest levels of our society. It is a test of survival," Velthara continued. 7 days alone in the Crimson Wastes with minimal supplies. Only the strongest and most determined survive. Jake felt his mouth go dry. The Crimson Wastes were the most dangerous region on this planet's surface. Even with the colony's advanced technology, no one went there except in armed groups with full environmental suits. "This is insane," Kethara said, her voice shaking. "The Kethmiran is meant for trained Zalathi warriors, not humans. Jake could die out there." "Yes," Velthara agreed calmly. "He could. Many Zalathi have died attempting the Kethmiran, but those who survive prove that they have the strength, courage, and determination that our people value above all else." Jake tried to understand what was really happening here. "Why are you asking me to do this?" "Because your friendship with my daughter has created a problem," Velthara said. "Some Zalathi see it as proof that humans can be our equals. Others see it as proof that we are lowering our standards. This trial would settle the question once and for all." "If I succeed?" Jake asked. "If you succeed, it would prove that humans have the strength and determination to stand as true equals with the Zalathi. It would change how both our peoples see each other." "And if I fail?" Elder Zeftal answered this time. "If you fail, it would prove that humans are indeed too weak for true partnership. It would confirm what many of us already believe, that humans should remain junior partners in this alliance following Zalathi leadership." Jake felt the weight of the decision pressing down on him. This was not just about him or his friendship with Kethara. This was about the future relationship between their entire species. "Jake, please," Kethara said, reaching for his hand. "You do not have to do this. My mother cannot force you." Velthara nodded. "That is true. The Kethmiran must be accepted freely, or it has no meaning. But know this, young human. If you refuse, many Zalathi will see it as proof that humans lack courage when truly tested." Jake looked around the room at the three Zalathi faces watching him. Belthara's expression was unreadable. Elder Zeftal looked like he expected Jake to refuse, but Cathara's face was full of fear and pleading. Jake thought about his 2 years on New Terra Colony. He thought about the careful balance between humans and Zalathi and how easily it could be destroyed. He thought about all the humans and Zalathi who were trying to build something new together. Most of all, he thought about what it would mean if he walked away from this challenge. Not just for him, but for every human who came after him. "I accept," Jake said quietly. The room fell completely silent. Even the wall light seemed to dim in response to his words. Cathara stared at him in horror. "Jake, no. You do not understand what you are agreeing to." "I understand enough," Jake said, though his heart was pounding. "If this is what it takes to prove that humans and Zalathi can be true partners, then I'll do it." Belthara studied his face for a long moment. "You have 48 hours to prepare," she said finally. "Then you will enter the Crimson Wastes alone. If you emerge after 7 days, you will have earned something no human has ever possessed: the complete respect of the Zalathi people." As Jake walked back through the colony that night, he wondered if he had just made the biggest mistake of his life. But he also knew that he could not have made any other choice. Too much depended on proving that humans were worthy of the partnership they were trying to build. The next 2 days would determine not just his own fate, but the future of human-Zalathi relations for generations to come. Word of Jake's challenge spread through New Terra Colony like wildfire. By the next morning, everyone knew that a human was going to attempt the Zalathi trial of survival. The reaction was immediate and intense. Jake sat in his quarters trying to make a list of supplies he would need when his door chimed. Amy Foster entered without waiting for permission, her face dark with anger. "Have you completely lost your mind?" she demanded, slamming the door behind her. "Jake, this is suicide. The Crimson Wastes kill trained Zalathi warriors. What makes you think a human engineer can survive out there?" Jake looked up from his notes. "I don't know if I can survive, but I know what happens if I don't try." Amy sat down across from him, her expression softening slightly. "Jake, there has to be another way. We can talk to Commander Hayes. He can make this a diplomatic issue, refuse to allow you to go." "And then what?" Jake asked. "The Zalathi will always wonder if humans are too weak to face real challenges. Every time we negotiate with them, they'll remember that we backed down when tested." Before Amy could respond, the door chimed again. This time it was Dr. Lisa Park, the colony's chief medical officer. She carried a small bag and looked determined. "I heard what you're planning," Dr. Park said without greeting. "It's incredibly dangerous, but if you're really going to do this, you need medical supplies." Amy stood up. "Lisa, don't encourage him. This is madness." Dr. Park ignored Amy and began pulling items from her bag. Emergency antibiotics, pain medication, wound sealers, and water purification tablets. The wastes are full of toxic bacteria that can kill you in hours if you get infected. Jake took the supplies gratefully. "Thank you, Dr. Park. I know you're risking your career by helping me." "My career won't matter much if human-Zalathi relations collapse because we were too proud to accept their challenge," Dr. Park replied. The door chimed a third time. Commander Rick Hayes entered, his face grim. The colony's military leader was a tall, stern man who had fought in the wars that led to the discovery of the Zalathi. "Morrison," he said in his command voice, "I'm ordering you to stand down. You will not attempt this trial." Jake stood up and faced his commanding officer. "Sir, with respect, I'm not a soldier. I'm a civilian contractor. You can't order me not to go." Commander Hayes' face turned red. "I can and I will. This colony is under military jurisdiction and I will not allow you to risk your life for some alien ritual." "Commander," Amy said carefully, "maybe Jake is right. If he refuses the challenge, it could damage our relationship with the Zalathi." Hayes spun around to face Amy. "Foster, are you supporting this insanity?" Amy looked uncomfortable. "I think it's dangerous and stupid, but I also think Jake might be right about what it means if he doesn't go." Hayes was quiet for a moment, thinking. Finally, he sighed. "Morrison, if you do this and survive, I'll recommend you for a medal. If you do this and die, I'll make sure your family knows you were an idiot." Jake almost smiled. "I understand, sir." After the others left, Jake continued his preparations. The rules of the Keth Mirren were simple but harsh. He could take basic survival supplies, food for 3 days, water for the same, a simple shelter, and basic tools. No advanced technology, No weapons, no communication devices except for an emergency beacon that would summon rescue if activated. But using the beacon meant automatic failure of the trial. That evening, Cathara came to his quarters. Her gems were a deep blue color that Jake had learned meant sadness and worry. "Jake, please reconsider," she said as soon as the door closed. "My mother will understand if you change your mind." Jake shook his head. "No, she won't. And neither will Elder Zeftol or any of the other Zalathi who think humans are weak." Cathara sat down heavily. "There are things about the wastes that you do not know. Things my mother did not tell you." "What kind of things?" "The storms carry more than just wind and sand. They carry toxins that can drive living beings mad. The rock formations are not just rock. They are alive and they hunt. The temperature changes can freeze or cook you in minutes." Jake felt his stomach tighten, but he tried not to show his fear. "How do Zalathi warriors survive?" "Many do not," Cathara said quietly. "And those who do survive have been trained from childhood for the trial. They know the signs of danger, the places to hide, the ways to find water and food." Jake was quiet for a moment. "Will you teach me what you can?" Cathara's gems flickered with surprise, then shifted to a determined orange color. "Yes, I will tell you everything I know." They spent the next several hours going over everything Cathara could remember about Zalathi survival techniques. She taught him how to recognize the signs of an approaching toxic storm, how to find underground water sources, and how to identify which of the wastes' creatures were dangerous and which were merely frightening. "The most important thing," she said as dawn approached, "is to never stop moving. The wastes have a way of making people want to give up, to just lie down and wait for death. You must fight that feeling with everything you have." The morning of the trial came too quickly. Jake stood at the colony's northern airlock, wearing the basic environmental suit that would be his only protection against the waste's harsh atmosphere. His supplies were packed in a simple backpack that felt impossibly light for 7 days of survival. A crowd had gathered to see him off. Most of the humans looked worried or skeptical. The Zalathi who had come to watch were harder to read, their gems showing a mixture of colors that Jake could not interpret. Matriarch Velthera approached him as he checked his equipment one final time. "Are you ready, Jake Morrison?" Jake nodded, not trusting his voice. "Remember," Velthera said, "you must survive 7 full days in the wastes. You will be tracked by our sensors, but no help will come unless you activate your emergency beacon. If you use the beacon, the trial ends in failure." Jake understood. He would rather die than fail and prove the Zalathi right about human weakness. The airlock opened and Jake got his first look at the crimson wastes. The landscape before him was like something from a nightmare. Red sand stretched to the horizon, broken by twisted formations of crystal and stone that seemed to move when he was not looking directly at them. The sky was a sickly yellow color, and even through his suit's filters he could smell something that reminded him of rotting metal. Jake stepped through the airlock and heard it seal behind him. There was no going back now. The first day was not as bad as he had expected. Jake made good progress across the sand, following the route that Cathara had suggested. The temperature was hot but manageable, and his suit's cooling system kept him comfortable. As evening approached, Jake found a sheltered spot between 2 large rock formations and set up his basic shelter. The thin fabric walls would not provide much protection, but they were better than sleeping in the open. Jake was just finishing his meager dinner of energy rations when he heard the wind begin to pick up. At first it was just a gentle breeze, but within minutes it had become a howling gale that threatened to tear his shelter apart. Then he smelled it, the toxic, metallic smell that Cathara had warned him about. This was not just a windstorm. This was one of the waste's deadly toxic storms. Jake grabbed his emergency supplies and abandoned his shelter, just as the storm hit with full force. The wind was strong enough to knock him off his feet, and the air was full of sand and chemicals that would kill him in minutes if they got through his suit. He stumbled toward the rock formations, hoping to find some kind of cave or overhang that would protect him. The storm was so intense that he could barely see 3 feet in front of him. His suit's sensors were going crazy, warning him about dangerous chemical levels in the air around him. Jake found a crack in the rocks that was just big enough for him to squeeze through. He crawled into what turned out to be a narrow cave and collapsed, gasping for breath. His shelter was gone, torn apart by the wind. Most of his supplies were scattered across the wastes. As the storm raged outside, Jake realized that he had just made it through his first 6 hours in the crimson wastes. He had 6 days and 18 hours left to go. The cave was dark and cold, and Jake could hear strange sounds echoing from deeper inside. He did not know what was making those sounds, but he had a feeling he was going to find out. Jake crouched in the cave entrance, listening to the toxic storm rage outside while strange clicking sounds echoed from the darkness behind him. His emergency light cast dancing shadows on the cave walls, revealing that the rock around him was not ordinary stone. It was the same crystalline material he had seen in the Zealothi compound. But these crystals were dark and seemed to pulse with a faint, unhealthy light. The clicking sounds were getting closer. Jake turned his light deeper into the cave and froze. Moving toward him was something that looked like a spider made of living crystal. It was about the size of a house cat, with 8 legs that ended in razor-sharp points. Its body was translucent, and Jake could see some kind of fluid moving through it like blood. As his light hit the creature, it stopped and made a high-pitched shrieking sound. More clicking answered from deeper in the cave. Jake realized he was not dealing with one creature, but with a whole colony of them. The storm outside was still raging, but Jake could not stay in this cave. He gathered what remained of his supplies and moved back toward the entrance. The crystal spider followed him, staying just at the edge of his light. Jake remembered something Cathara had told him about the creatures of the wastes. Most of them hunted by vibration, not sight. They could feel movement through the ground and rock. That gave him an idea. Jake pulled off one of his boots and threw it as hard as he could toward the back of the cave. It hit the wall with a loud crash, and immediately he heard the sound of dozens of crystal spiders rushing toward the noise. While the creatures were distracted, Jake slipped out of the cave and back into the storm. The wind was still dangerous, but the toxic chemicals seemed to be clearing. He could survive in the storm for a short time if he was careful. Jake found another rock formation about 100 yards away and discovered a small overhang that would provide some shelter. He waited there until the storm passed, shivering in the cold and trying not to think about how much of his equipment he had lost. When morning came, Jake took stock of his situation. His shelter was gone. Half of his food was missing. His water supplies were running low. He had 6 more days to survive, and he was already in serious trouble. But Jake was an engineer, and engineers were good at solving problems with limited resources. He looked around at the alien landscape and started to see possibilities instead of just dangers. The rock formations were not just obstacles, they were potential sources of shelter and tools. The strange crystals that grew everywhere might contain minerals he could use. Even the toxic storms might be useful if he could find a way to harvest the moisture they carried. Jake spent the second day exploring the area around his hiding spot. He discovered that the crystal formations were hollow in places, creating natural shelters. More importantly, he found that water collected in the hollow crystals during storms. The water was contaminated with minerals that would be deadly to most life forms. But Jake's human physiology was more adaptable than Zealothi biology. Using pieces of his torn shelter as filters, Jake created a simple water purification system. It was not perfect, but it could remove enough of the toxins to make the water drinkable for a human. It was a trick that would not work for a Zealothi, whose bodies could not process certain minerals that humans could handle. On the third day, Jake encountered his first major predator. He was moving across an area of flat sand when he heard a deep rumbling sound coming from underground. The sand around him began to vibrate, and Jake realized that something very large was moving beneath the surface. Suddenly, the sand exploded upward, and a creature emerged that was unlike anything Jake had ever seen. It looked like a massive worm made of the same crystal material as the smaller spiders. But this creature was over 20 feet long, and as thick as a tree trunk. Its mouth was filled with rows of crystal teeth that sparkled in the dim light. Cathara had mentioned these creatures. The Zealothi called them shard stalkers, and they were one of the most dangerous predators in the wastes. They hunted by feeling vibrations through the ground, and they were fast enough to catch almost anything that moved across the sand. The creature oriented on Jake and began moving toward him with surprising speed. Jake ran, but he knew he could not outrun something that size for very long. He needed a different strategy. Jake remembered his training as an engineer. Every system had weaknesses and every predator had limitations. The shard stalker was fast and powerful, but it was also huge and heavy. That meant it needed solid ground to support its weight. Jake changed direction and ran toward an area where the sand was softer and deeper. The creature followed, leaving a trail of churned sand behind it. When Jake reached the soft sand, he suddenly stopped and began jumping up and down, creating as much vibration as possible. The shard stalker accelerated toward him, excited by the strong vibrations. But when it hit the soft sand at full speed, its massive weight caused it to sink. The creature thrashed and struggled, but the more it moved, the deeper it sank. Jake had trapped it using the same principle that made quicksand dangerous. The creature's own size and weight had become a liability instead of an advantage. He left the shard stalker struggling in the sand and continued on his way. It was a victory that no Zalathi warrior had ever achieved, not through strength or speed, but through understanding and using the environment. On the fourth day, Jake discovered something that changed everything. Hidden in a valley between two large crystal formations, he found ruins. The buildings were clearly Zalathi in origin, but they were old, far older than the colony or any Zalathi settlement Jake had seen. The architecture was similar to modern Zalathi construction, but more primitive. These ruins predated the technology that the Zalathi used to travel between stars. Jake explored the ruins carefully, and what he found amazed him. This had been a settlement, maybe even a city. There were remains of homes, workshops, and what looked like a temple or ceremonial building. The Zalathi had lived here long ago, before they had developed the ability to leave their planet. In the temple, Jake found wall carvings that told a story. The images showed young Zalathi undergoing trials in the wastes, proving themselves worthy to join their society. But the carvings also showed something else: humans. The artwork was crude, but Jake could clearly see figures that looked human standing alongside Zalathi. The carvings seemed to suggest that humans and Zalathi had met before, long ago on the Zalathi homeworld. Jake stared at the wall carvings for a long time, trying to understand what they meant. Had humans visited the Zalathi homeworld in ancient times? Had there been contact between their species before the recent first contact that led to the colony treaties? The discovery raised more questions than it answered, but it also gave Jake hope. If humans and Zalathi had worked together in the past, maybe they were meant to work together now. Jake spent the night in the ruins, sheltered from another toxic storm that passed overhead. As he lay in what had once been a Zalathi home, he thought about the trial he was undergoing. Maybe this was not just about proving human strength or courage. Maybe it was about rediscovering something that had been lost long ago. On the fifth day, Jake's water ran out. He had been careful with his supplies, using his improvised purification system to stretch his water as far as possible. But the heat and the physical demands of survival in the wastes had taken their toll. His body needed more water than he could provide. Jake spent the day searching for more water sources, but the crystal formations in this area were dry. No storms had passed recently, and the underground sources he had found earlier were too far away. By evening, Jake was suffering from severe dehydration. His vision was blurry and his thoughts were becoming confused. He knew that he could activate his emergency beacon and be rescued within hours, but that would mean admitting failure and proving that humans were too weak for the trial. Jake found a sheltered spot and sat down to think. 2 more days. He just had to survive 2 more days, and he would have proven that humans deserved respect from the Zalathi. But without water, he would not last until morning. As night fell, Jake noticed something he had not seen before. The crystal formations around him were beginning to glow more brightly. At first he thought it was just his dehydrated brain playing tricks on him. But the glow was real and it was getting stronger. Jake realized that the crystals were responding to the approaching dawn. They were somehow storing energy from the planet's twin suns and releasing it at night. The light was not just beautiful, it was functional. If the crystals could store and release energy, maybe they could store and release other things too. Like water. Jake began examining the crystal formations more carefully. In some of the larger crystals, he could see what looked like liquid moving inside, not the toxic mineral water he had found before, but something clearer and purer. Using a piece of metal from his equipment, Jake carefully chipped away at one of the crystals until he created a small opening. Clear, clean water began to flow out. Jake cupped the water in his hands and tasted it carefully. It was the purest water he had ever tasted, with no trace of the toxins that contaminated the surface water. The crystals were natural purification systems, cleaning and storing water from the storms and making it safe to drink. It was another discovery that no Zalathi had ever made. Jake woke up in a bed that felt softer than clouds. His first thought was that he must be dreaming, because the last thing he remembered was collapsing in the sand while watching the rescue ships approach. Then he opened his eyes and saw Kithara sitting beside his bed, her gems glowing with relief and joy. "You did it," she said softly. "You survived the Kethmaran." Jake tried to sit up, but his body protested. Every muscle ached and his skin felt raw from exposure to the waste's harsh environment. "How long was I unconscious?" "2 days," said a voice from across the room. Jake turned to see Dr. Park approaching with a medical scanner. "You were severely dehydrated and exhausted, but otherwise in remarkably good condition for someone who spent a week in the Crimson Wastes." Dr. Park ran her scanner over Jake's body, checking his vital signs. "Your recovery rate is impressive. Most humans would need weeks to bounce back from what you went through." "Where am I?" Jake asked, looking around the room. The walls had the same glowing quality as Zalathi architecture, but the medical equipment was human-made. "You are in the Zalathi medical facility," Kithara explained. "My people insisted on treating you themselves. It is an honor that few outsiders have ever received." Before Jake could ask what that meant, the door opened and Matriarch Velthara entered. Her expression was unreadable, but her gems were glowing with a steady golden light that Jake had learned meant respect. "Jake Morrison," she said formally, "you have completed the Kethmiran. In doing so, you have earned something that no human has ever possessed: the full respect and recognition of the Zalathi High Council." Jake sat up straighter, ignoring the discomfort. "Thank you, Matriarch. I hope this proves that humans and Zalathi can work together as equals." Velthara was quiet for a moment. "It has proven more than that, young human. Your methods during the trial have created some unexpected reactions among my people." Something in her tone made Jake nervous. "What kind of reactions?" Velthara gestured, and Elder Zeftol entered the room. The old Zalathi's gems were flickering between colors that Jake could not read. "Tell him," Velthara said to her advisor. Elder Zeftol cleared his throat. "Your survival techniques in the wastes were innovative. The way you trapped the shard stalker, your discovery of crystal water sources, your psychological intimidation of the apex predator. These are tactics that no Zalathi warrior has ever used." "Is that bad?" Jake asked. "Not bad," Zeftol continued, "but very interesting to our military caste. They see potential in human methods that they had not considered before." Jake felt a chill that had nothing to do with his medical condition. "What do you mean?" Velthara answered. "A faction of Zalathi military leaders wants to recruit humans for our armed forces. They believe your adaptability and unconventional thinking would make humans valuable soldiers in our conflicts with other alien species." Jake stared at her in shock. That's not what this was supposed to prove. This was supposed to show that humans could be partners, not weapons. "Indeed," Velthara agreed. "But success often brings unexpected consequences. The military faction believes that if humans can survive the Kethmaran, they can survive anything. They want to use human soldiers in campaigns against species that have been troublesome to the Zalathi Empire." Kithara leaned forward, her gems flashing with anger. "Mother, you cannot seriously be considering this." "I am not considering it," Velthara said firmly. "But others are. The High Council will meet tomorrow to discuss Jake's trial and its implications. Some members will argue that humans should be recruited as soldiers. Others will argue that humans have proven their worth as equal partners." Jake felt the weight of responsibility settling on his shoulders again. "So my trial solved one problem but created another." "Yes," Velthara said. "And now you must help us solve this new problem." Dr. Park stepped forward. "Jake, you don't have to do anything else. You've already done more than anyone could expect." But Jake knew better. He could see in Velthara's expression that this was not a request. The future of human-Zalathi relations still hung in the balance, and somehow, it was still his responsibility to tip it in the right direction. "What do you need me to do?" Jake asked. Velthara sat down in a chair beside his bed. "You must speak to the High Council. You must convince them that humanity's value lies not in war, but in the unique perspectives and solutions that humans can bring to problems." "How do I do that?" "By showing them an alternative," Kithara said suddenly. Her gems were glowing with excitement as an idea formed. Jake, during your trial you made discoveries that no Zalathi has ever made. The crystal water, the ruins, the new survival techniques. These are not military applications. These are scientific breakthroughs. Jake began to understand. You want me to propose a different kind of partnership? Exactly, Velthera said. Instead of using humans as soldiers, we could use human adaptability and ingenuity for exploration and terraforming. Your people could help us turn dead worlds into living ones. Jake thought about the ancient ruins he had discovered in the wastes, with their carvings showing humans and Zalathi working together. Maybe that ancient partnership had been about creation, not destruction. I'll need help preparing my presentation, Jake said. You will have it, Velthera promised. Cathara will assist you, and I will provide access to our scientific databases. The next day, Jake stood before the Zalathi High Council in a chamber that took his breath away. The room was a perfect sphere made of living crystal that displayed images of planets and star systems. 12 high-ranking Zalathi sat in chairs that floated around the sphere's interior, their gems creating a light show of different colors and emotions. Jake had prepared carefully for this moment. He wore his best clothes and carried a presentation device that Cathara had helped him prepare, but he knew that everything depended on the next few minutes. Honored council members, Jake began. I stand before you not as a warrior or a soldier, but as an engineer and explorer. My trial in the Crimson Wastes was not about proving human strength in battle. It was about proving human ability to adapt, learn, and find solutions to impossible problems. Jake activated his presentation device, showing images from his week in the wastes. During my trial, I made several discoveries that could benefit both our peoples. I found new water sources, new survival techniques, and evidence of ancient cooperation between humans and Zalathi. One of the council members, a Zalathi with deep purple skin and silver gems, spoke up. These discoveries are interesting, young human, but our military leaders believe your survival skills would be more valuable in combat against our enemies. Jake had expected this objection. With respect, honored counselor, using humans as soldiers would waste our greatest strength. Any species can be trained to fight, but not every species can look at an impossible situation and find a new solution. Jake changed his presentation to show images of dead worlds in Zalathi space. Your empire contains dozens of planets that could support life, but are currently uninhabitable. Human adaptability could help you terraform these worlds, creating new homes for both our peoples. Another council member spoke. Terraforming is slow and expensive. Military conquest is faster, but conquest only gives you what already exists, Jake replied. Terraforming creates something new. It builds instead of destroying. Jake took a deep breath and made his final argument. Honored council, my trial proved that humans can survive your greatest challenges. But more importantly, it proved that humans and Zalathi can work together to achieve things that neither species could accomplish alone. Jake gestured to Cathara, who stood at the edge of the chamber. For 2 years, Cathara and I have been partners. Together, we have maintained systems that keep our entire colony alive. That partnership is the future, not humans serving Zalathi or Zalathi commanding humans, but both species working as equals toward common goals. The council chamber fell silent as the members considered Jake's words. Their gems flickered through various colors as they communicated with each other through light patterns that Jake could not read. Finally, the senior council member spoke. Jake Morrison, your trial has shown us that humans possess qualities we had not fully appreciated. Your proposal for joint terraforming expeditions is intriguing. Jake felt a surge of hope. However, the counselor continued, such a partnership would require trust and cooperation on a scale our peoples have never attempted. Are you prepared to help lead such an endeavor? Jake looked at Cathara, who was practically glowing with excitement. He thought about the ancient ruins and their carvings of humans and Zalathi working together. Maybe this was what their ancestors had tried to build long ago. Yes, Jake said. I am. The senior counselor's gem shifted to a warm golden color. Then let it be recorded that the Zalathi High Council approves the establishment of joint human-Zalathi terraforming expeditions. Jake Morrison will serve as the human liaison for this new partnership. As the council session ended and the members began to file out, Belthara approached Jake. You have done something remarkable, young human. You have changed the course of history for both our peoples. Jake smiled, but he felt the weight of his new responsibilities. I hope I can live up to what I've promised. You will, Cathara said, joining them. We will do it together just like we always have.